The envelope is cream-colored. The expensive kind, heavier than it needs to be, like someone wanted even the outside to carry weight. It sits in the center of my Uncle Rajan's dining room table. A table he built himself 12 years ago from reclaimed oak because he said good wood shouldn't be thrown away just because it's been used. Around that table sit my parents, my Aunt Sunita, and a man named Gerald Hoyt, who drove 40 minutes from the city carrying a manila folder, a notary stamp, and a silence that settles into the room the way cold air settles when someone forgets to close a door in February. My father is looking at the table. My mother is looking at Gerald. Gerald opens the folder. And that's when everything my family had been absolutely certain of for nearly a year begins quietly and without ceremony to come apart. My name is Arjun Krishnamurti. I'm a licensed civil engineer. I've spent 16 years calculating stress tolerances, how much weight a structure can carry, where the cracks are most likely to form, what looks solid but isn't. I tell you this because it shaped how I watched everything that followed, and how I waited. My grandfather, Suresh Krishnamurti, came to this country in 1972 with less than $500 and a suitcase held together with a leather belt. He worked 31 years at a textile manufacturing plant, quality control, then floor supervisor, then the kind of institutional knowledge a company can't replace and eventually tries to. He retired at 67. He never complained about any of it. Not once that I ever heard. He was the kind of man who fixed things himself. Leaky faucets, torn screen doors, the carburetor on a 1987 Buick that had no business still running. He kept a small notebook in his shirt pocket where he wrote down measurements, costs, things he didn't want to forget. I still have it. 43 pages of his handwriting. My parents and my Aunt Sunita treated his generosity the way some people treat a salary, expected, owed, and irritating when it arrived slightly late. I watched this for years without naming it. My grandfather named it once. He was driving me home after a Sunday dinner, and he said, without looking away from the road, "The ones who never helped you build something always have the loudest opinions about how it should be divided." I was 24. I didn't fully understand it then. I do now. When my grandfather had his first cardiac event 3 years ago, it was me who sat in the hospital waiting room for 7 hours. Me who spoke to the cardiologist. Me who drove 40 minutes each way to his apartment every Tuesday and Thursday for 4 months of cardiac rehab. My parents visited twice during that stretch. My Aunt Sunita sent a fruit basket. The morning after he was discharged, my mother pulled me into the hospital corridor and said, and I remember this exactly because I wrote it down that same evening, "Your father and I have been talking. It makes sense for care management to have access to Suresh's accounts. For efficiency." She said efficiency. She said care management. She said it 14 hours after a 78-year-old man had been admitted for chest pain. I said, "He can speak for himself. He's 78, not unconscious." Her expression didn't change, which told me everything. The family meeting came 2 weeks later. My father presented it as a planning conversation. He used phrases like estate consolidation and generational continuity, and it's just paperwork. My aunt nodded along. My cousin Deepak, Sunita's older son, brought up the apartment my grandfather owned and mentioned that property management was complicated for someone his age. My grandfather sat at the end of the table. He waited until my father finished. Then he said, "How much do you think is there?" My father blinked. "We need to review." "I know exactly what's there," my grandfather said. "I'm asking if you do." Nobody answered. I said, "I'd like any arrangement to be reviewed by an independent attorney before anything is signed." My father's voice went flat and loud at the same time. He said I'd always made everything harder than it needed to be, that I thought I knew more than everyone, that Suresh was his father, not my project, and if I couldn't contribute constructively, he'd rather I didn't contribute at all. My grandfather looked at me across the table, not with distress, with something that looked more like confirmation. I stood up. I said, "I'm leaving. You're welcome to come with me." He stood up. He got his jacket. He walked out with me. He moved into my second bedroom 6 days later. 2 suitcases, a box of books, his tools, and a small steel lockbox, dark green, that he placed on the shelf in the closet and didn't mention. I installed grab bars in the bathroom myself. I rescheduled site visits to keep his cardiology appointments. We ate dinner together most nights. He taught me to make his version of dal. The simple one, he said, not the restaurant kind. And he critiqued my technique in the specific way of someone who had cooked the same dish for 50 years and found it genuinely offensive to watch it done incorrectly. He died on a Wednesday in November. In his sleep, the night before, he'd eaten the dal he said he'd perfected in 1987 and told me over the kitchen table that he had done everything he set out to do. I thought it was the kind of thing old men said. Gerald Hoyt called 4 weeks later. My grandfather had retained him in 2018, 4 years before the cardiac event, 4 years before the family meeting. He had updated the will twice. The most recent update was dated 8 months earlier, 6 weeks after he came to stay with me. The estate, the apartment on Meridian Drive, valued at $290,000. Investment accounts totaling $195,000. Opened in his name alone, never joint property. A savings account with $38,000. His pension and provident fund, $44,000. Total, $567,000. My mother said that number was impossible. Gerald Hoyt said it was documented. My father said those accounts were supposed to be family accounts. He said Suresh had always said so. Gerald replied that the accounts were indeed for the family. Then he read the distribution. To my Aunt Sunita, $28,000 outright. To my parents, $35,000, held in trust for documented medical expenses only. The remainder, the apartment, the investment accounts, the savings, to Arjun Krishnamurti, with one condition, that his grandfather's tool chest never be sold outside the family. My mother's voice broke. It didn't sound like grief. It sounded like a wall failing under load it was never actually designed to carry. I opened the steel lockbox. Inside, documents, photographs, letters, and a single folded note in my grandfather's handwriting. Everything I built myself. What I gave was given freely. A gift does not become a debt owed to the giver's children. Arjun understood this. He showed up. That is the whole of it. The legal challenge came. Undue influence, they argued. The court reviewed the evidence. There was none against me. 2 prior amendments predated my involvement entirely. A signed statement from his cardiologist confirmed full mental capacity at the time of the final update. The challenge was dismissed in 4 months. I called my father before the ruling. I offered mediation. He said he would not be corrected by his own son about his own father's intentions. I thanked him for the clarity and told Gerald to proceed. I did not sell the apartment on Meridian Drive. I rent it now to a young couple, Marcus and Priya, who were expecting their first child in the spring. Marcus asked if he could put a small vegetable garden in the side yard. I said yes. I said my grandfather would have respected that. The tool chest is in my garage. I've been using it. I'm not as precise as he was yet, but I'm learning his system. Last week I fixed a cabinet door using the same method he showed me once in 20 minutes, the right way, the way that holds. He told me once on the drive home from a Sunday dinner that the only inheritance worth passing down isn't money. It's knowing how to build something and choosing to. Quiet integrity doesn't announce itself. It shows up, week after week, in the unremarkable faithfulness of being present when it costs you something. If there's someone in your life doing that quietly, call them today. Not a text, a call. Ask if you can come over. Sit at whatever table they have. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs it. Subscribe so these stories reach you when you need them most.